It's the 5th anniversary of the Arab Uprising, which began in Tunisia and spread through the Arab world. CCTV's Yasser Hakim takes a look at how the 2011 unrest is now viewed in North Africa 5 years later.
That fateful day in Tunisia reshaped the future of the region and the fate of 3 North African leaders. One escaped and died in exile. The other was jailed, and the third killed by his own people. The people ousted their presidents for the hope of a better life, but 5 years on, it doesn't look so rosy. Libya suffered the most, with ISIL and other militias wreaking havoc in the politically divided nation. Egypt and Tunisia, however, took a different path to Libya.
The dreams of freedom weren't materialized immediately. It was the same scenario in both countries. The Islamist forces in Muslim Brotherhood took over power. What happened with the Tunisians happened with the Egyptians. They ousted the Islamists later.
But this came at a cost of lives and prolonged suffering. It also provided the fertile land for terrorism to spread. And eventually, the economies of the 2 countries and vital industries such as tourism were hit by the political unrest.
Where are these states from the development they seeked in their uprisings? They revolted against poverty, but we are more poor now. There is more unemployment in these countries, and they all still need to counter the growth of corruption.
Though many now are doubting the benefits of these uprisings, the changes have brought in a new sense of belief.
These revolutions led to important changes in the Arab world and in the powers leading us to the future. No one will be able to totally control or be authoritarian in the Arab world or Arab countries. Leaders now cannot ignore the lessons learned from the Arab revolts.
The feelings are mixed towards the uprisings of 2011, but one thing's for sure, it's been 5 years since the unrest, and yet there's still a lot of rebuilding to do. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
Well, let's get some perspective now on that anniversary. I'm joined live from our Nairobi studios by security expert Dr. Ali Mustafa, and also joining us live from Cairo is Samay Rashad, a political researcher and analyst at the Al Ahram Foundation. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to Africa Live. Let's begin with you, Dr. Mustafa. It has, of course, now been 5 years since that Arab uprising, but in some cases, it looks like the situation in the Arab world is more volatile than ever. Was it all a big mistake?
No, it was not a big mistake. It's unfortunate that Middle East, the Arab world, has become unstable, very volatile, but that the Arab Uprising had to take place, that had to be done. It was time for economic reforms, it was time for military reforms, it was time for security reforms, it was time for political reforms in the Middle East in 2011. Unfortunately, the management of the uprising and the revolutions that took place across the Middle East, those revolutions were not managed well. They were manipulated by forces inside and outside the Arab world. For example, authoritarian regimes that were friends to, are still friends to the West, were kept put. They should have done better. Western countries were suspicious of Muslim and Islamic regimes, and this didn't make the matter better. And the mistakes that have been done, particularly in Libya and in Syria, are mistakes that should not have happened in the first place. It could have been handled better.
Dr. Mustafa, we will return to that question, in particular around Libya. But for now, let's turn to you, Mr. Rashad. How do you think Egypt has fared over the past couple of years? I mean, first Mubarak was ousted, then Morsi, and now al-Sisi is in power. Has Egypt worked through the core issues that were there during the Arab uprising?
I think that Egypt has its private mechanism in dealing with the uprising of January 2011. Egyptians demonstrated and got into the streets demanding for 3 main points freedom, social justice, and a reasonable level of living or standard of living. So I don't think that after 5 years any of these demands has been done, not yet, not only in Mubarak regime, but also in the SCAF, the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, and also in Morsi or the Muslim Brotherhood era, and now also in a Sisi era. But Egypt, let's say that it's standing now in a middle point. It has not been handled like your guest in Nairobi said. Its revolution or its uprising has not been met with the force, with oppression like Syria, like Yemen, like Libya as well, and it couldn't manage, it couldn't get through or get over that gap like Tunis, for example. There are two main targets has been achieved up till now. The lack of security. Now there are a good situation of security in Egypt, and the second one, it's the avoiding to dismantle or to collapse the country and dismantle its institutions. And this is a very important 2 points, I think, or 2 goals that the Egyptian uprising has achieved up till now, but it's still the main or the original demands of the January revolution has not achieved yet.
Dr. Mustafa, let's return to you now on that point you mentioned earlier. Of course, one of the biggest contentious issues in Africa when it comes to the Arab uprising is the case of Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. In retrospect, did Africa and perhaps even the West make a mistake when it comes to Gaddafi?
Yeah, particularly the West made a mistake in dealing with Gaddafi and in the manner that United Nations Resolution 1973 was implemented. That resolution was extended and taken too far to oust Gaddafi and execute a regime change in Libya. Africa was too weak to do anything, and Africa was not listened to by the West. A plane carrying a delegation from Africa was turned back mid-air because the bombing was going on. Africa had a plan, presented a plan to address the issue of Libya so that there could be a more stable transition in Libya. None of the leaders in the West listened or gave Africans a chance to actually look at that plan. And therefore, when the West made that decision to extend that resolution illegally to remove Gaddafi, that's where the entire problem of Libya started. And that's where the problem is today. Instability, chaos, infighting between different tribes and different sectarian interests in Libya.
Absolutely. Well, let's quickly go back to Mr. Rashad now in Cairo. Mr. Rashad, of course, as you mentioned earlier, those key demands, freedom, social justice, standard of living, those are the demands that were not met, have not been met 5 years later in Egypt. Some would even go further and suggest that nothing much has changed, that Mubarak and al-Sisi's governments are in fact very similar in terms of civil liberties and media freedom. How would you respond to that claim?
Yeah, well, we have 2 levels to evaluate or to assess the Egyptian situation now. First is related to the political attitude and the economic policy. And in this level, I don't see, I think that Egypt now is still searching for its way politically and economically also. So we didn't come back to Mubarak regime or to Mubarak policies completely, but also we did not get out of them completely. We still standing in some mysterious point, in fact. And the second level is regarding the civil liberties, the civil rights, and the freedom of justice, of expression, and so on. I think, and it's clear now for every Egyptian that there are many tools or many procedures that has been taken to restrict the freedom in Egypt. We are sitting back, we are coming back to worse than Mubarak regime, in fact. So yesterday, yesterday the Egyptian parliament has ratified the demonstration organizing law, which was criticized hardly and from all over the political powers. There are some cultural and expression centers in many points, and the human rights organization was attacked, was raid, some of their principles was taken in. The arrestment is very wide now. I think in the terms of civil liabilities, the situation is not very good, but it's much more worse. Let me tell you in one statement that what I'm saying now with you, I can't say or I couldn't say in the Egyptian television or even in the private channels in Egypt.
Well, certainly 5 years on and still a lot of work to be done in fulfilling those initial goals and demands of the Arab Spring. Thank you very much for the analysis to both of my guests.